Okay, I think we'll get started. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the informational session on the Arizona Environmental Infrastructure Authority overview. My name is Matt Lohr. I'm the Deputy Director of the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. And we wanted to hold this session. It's to provide an overview of the new Federal Environmental Infrastructure Authority that Congressman Greg Stanton secured for Arizona in the recently enacted Water Resources Development Act. The authority is designed to provide federal resources through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to assist small and rural communities as they address their water infrastructure needs. So we have some great speakers today, but before we get started, I just want to do a couple housekeeping notes. Because this is a webinar, you'll be able to see and hear the speakers and panelists, but we will not be able to see your face or hear your audio. That said, an important part of the session is your questions to the speakers. So to ask a question at any time, please write your question in the Q&A section in Zoom. You will find this on the top or bottom of your Zoom screen. We ask not the chat, but the actual Q&A section. The speaker and panelists will then take questions during the presentation. Feel free to write your question anytime, and then we're going to have a designated time to answer those questions. If for some reason the speakers are not able to get to your question today during today's session, we will also send you the speaker's contact information so you can contact them after this event if you have further questions. We're also going to record this session on our YouTube channel, so you can find that by going to the League website at azleague.org. And we'll also have the PowerPoint on that, and we'll have their contact information. So with that, we'll get started. Today, our speakers are, our first speaker is Tracy Sutton. Tracy is Legislative Director for Congressman Stanton. In that capacity, she handles the Congressman's Transportation Committee work, including water resource issues. She is a 24-year veteran of Capitol Hill. She's worked with several members in the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives. Another speaker we have today is Daryl Buxton. Mr. Buxton has been the chief of the Civil Works branch in the Programs and Project Management Division at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in the Los Angeles District. He has over 13 years of project management experience and over 25 years of experience in the Civil Works program at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He has a wide range of experience in flood risk reduction, ecosystem restoration, environmental infrastructure, and coastal storm damage and reduction projects. Also on hand today to assist us is Matt Lubasich. Matt is Congressman Greg Stanton's outreach coordinator. Prior to working with Congressman Stanton, he spent a year working for Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick in DC. He now lives in Phoenix and serves as Congressman Stanton's outreach coordinator, where he works to support the Congressman's legislative agenda in the district while maintaining and growing constituent relationships in the community. And finally, we have Derek Walker. Derek is a project manager in the Army Corps of Engineers Los Angeles District Civil Works branch. He has been with the Corps since 2009 and has a background in engineering design and construction oversight. So with that, Tracy, I will turn it over to you, and welcome.
Thanks, Matt, and thank you to the League for hosting us today. We are very excited to share this new program with you all as something that Congressman Stanton fought for last Congress, and we were successful in getting it enacted in the end of the year funding package as part of the Water Resources Development Act. So we'll go ahead and get started here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, go over with you, but we're very excited that the Arizona Environmental Infrastructure Authority is now law. One of the things I'm going to share with you is that over the last 20 years, Congress has designated specific communities, counties, and states to be eligible for planning, design, and construction of municipal drinking water and wastewater infrastructure projects. And Congress has authorized this through the Corps of Engineers. So every year, Congress typically provides a set amount of funds for environmental infrastructure authorities nationwide And then that funding is allocated to specific projects whose states have this authority. So in this last, for fiscal year 21, which was the funding package that Congress passed in December, Congress appropriated $100 million for environmental infrastructure nationwide. And so just give you an overview of how that funding was allocated. There was 27 projects across the country that were funded with that allocation of funds. The median project funding level was about $2.9 million. And they had funded a variety of projects, including water distribution lines, wastewater system improvements, pump stations, water treatment plant improvements, stormwater improvements, and sewer line replacement. One of the things that Congressman Stanton focused on early on in his tenure is realizing that Arizona was the only state in the Southwest region of the country that didn't have a statewide infrastructure authority through the Corps of Engineers. And he viewed this as an opportunity for us to secure another federal resource for the state, our cities, our tribes, our counties to access funding to do water infrastructure projects. Arizona was added to the existing Section 595 program for Western Rural Water in the 2020 Water Resources Development Act. The authority provides $150 million in federal assistance through the Army Corps of Engineers, specifically for the state of Arizona. And that authority will be in place until we have reached that level of funding. So it will be around for several years to come. Who is eligible for this authority? Cities, counties, rural water districts, and tribes are eligible to apply to this program for assistance. One important aspect of the program is that it operates on a reimbursable basis, meaning that the city or the county or the tribe fronts the money for the project first, has to complete the work, and then submits reimbursements to the Corps of Engineers. But typically it's a pass-through with the Corps, but it does operate on a reimbursable basis, which is different from other federal grants where a city or a county gets the grant money directly and then allocates it. A city will need to submit paperwork and reimbursements requests to the Corps for these funds. The other critical part is that projects need to be publicly owned and operated in order to qualify for the program. The authority is pretty broad in its scope of what types of projects can be funded. Wastewater treatment and related facilities, water supply, storage and treatment, environmental restoration, surface water protection, and it also allows smaller communities and more rural communities to apply for technical assistance. We are very excited that we were able to secure our first project for Arizona in fiscal year 21, which was $900,000 that was allocated for a new water distribution line for the Pasquiyaki tribe. So we're very excited about that, being able to get this authority in place and within a matter of less than 3 weeks, get the first Arizona project funded. I also would like to just kind of walk through what the responsibilities would be of the non-federal sponsor for the project. So as a city, what you would be responsible for if you decided to participate in this program. The program does require a 25% non-federal match. And it's important that any design work that you have done prior to submitting a project can be counted toward the non-federal match, with the federal government picking up 75% of the cost of the project. Locals are also responsible for providing all lands, easements, right-of-ways, relocations, and dredge material disposal sites needed for construction and maintenance of the project. Additionally, once the project is complete, the project sponsor, a non-federal sponsor, is responsible for all operation and maintenance costs associated with the project. In addition, the non-federal sponsor would be required to sign a project partnership agreement with the Corps of Engineers that outlines everybody's roles and responsibilities, including defining the scope of work of the project, as well as the cost reimbursement process. Some things to think about when considering whether to apply for this funding is your project designed? Has environmental work been done? Is it shovel ready? I think in prioritizing projects, those are some of the keys that the Corps will look at in ranking projects for funding under this authority. If you are ready to execute a project very quickly and can get funding and complete it within a year or shortly thereafter, those projects will have some priority just in the queue and the process. The other important issue is the size and cost of your project. This is not a program that can fund a large-scale $100 million project. As I noted earlier in the presentation, the median project funding level across the country is about 2.9 million. So what I've encouraged cities to think about is a project in the neighborhood of a total cost of $3 million is sort of your benchmark. If you have a project that's bigger than that, certainly something you can consider is can the project be segmented out and a portion be done with funding through this program. The other important thing is the ability for obviously the city to front the money for the project and get reimbursed, but also then have an identified non-federal match for the program. Something important to note is that the Corps of Engineers does allow other federal funds to count as non-federal matching funds. If the agency that you're using those funds from allows it. So for example, if some of your communities receive community development block grants, the Department of Housing and Urban Development does allow those funds to match other federal funds, and the Corps would allow those federal funds to be matched. You would be able to use those federal funds as your non-matching federal funds for this project. So something to keep in mind. And again, it's really up to the agency what their rules and regulations are of those federal funds, but the Corps does allow that. And then the other important thing is, who does the project serve? For the most part, this authority is sort of designed for more small and rural communities. But the other important thing to look at when it comes to this is, does this project serve an economically disadvantaged community? That will be an important factor that you want to consider in advocating for your project if it meets sort of those demographic qualities. The other thing to think about is, what is the local impact of the project? How does it benefit the local economy? And will it create jobs? So those are some of the key things that you should be looking at as you consider whether to take advantage of this program. So how do you apply? How do you get your name in the queue if your city has a project? It starts with submitting a letter of interest to the LA District of the U.S. Corps of Engineers outlining interest in participating in the Section 595 Arizona Environmental Infrastructure Program. That letter should top line provide a summary of the project cost and any work that you have completed to date. It should explain the benefits to the local economy, the extent to which it would enhance local development, and the ability to provide the non-federal match for the project. I've provided in the slide the address to send it to is to Colonel Julie Bolton. And we expect the next round of funding to be available in fiscal year 2022. Obviously, Congress will have to provide an allocation to environmental infrastructure funding again, and I wouldn't anticipate we would know how much money is available in fiscal year 2022 until the end of this calendar year. But again, as I said, funding this authority basically will continue in well into the future until we have been allocated 150 million, which is the authorized funding level of the program. We'd also encourage you, as you are putting your projects together, to reach out to both myself and to the Corps of Engineers to talk about your project and get more specifics about it. We'd also encourage you to share or copy your letter to Congressman Stanton's office so we can keep track of the projects that have been submitted to the Corps as they work to prioritize projects for funding. Ideally, if you look at projects that are funded across the country in this program, these state authorities get from anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 projects funded in a given year. It really depends on the size and scope of the project. So if there are a handful of projects that are under $1 million, the likelihood of multiple projects being funded in a given fiscal year is higher than if a project is a larger project, in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 million is submitted. It may be that only one project is funded in a fiscal year. I've included my contact information here, as well as Daryl Buxton with the Corps, who is the point person for the Arizona Environmental Infrastructure Authority. We are very excited about this program. It provides another tool in the toolbox for our communities to seek federal assistance for environmental infrastructure projects on a cost share it's pretty generous when you look at other programs across the federal government that are either loans or grants that are more of a 50-50 cost share, where this is a pretty generous 75-25 cost share. Ideally, it's best for projects to be something that can be wrapped up in a year, as I mentioned, and not something that would take multiple years of funding. I think our goal is to make sure this program reaches all parts of Arizona and that we can get as many projects funded as possible. Now I will go ahead and open it up for questions. I'm ready to take questions, and we can go from there.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. We do have some questions already in the queue, so I will ask these, and then you can either you, Daryl, or Derek, or Matt can answer the questions. So the first question is, does an upgrade or an expansion from 1.5 MGD to 3 MGD to an existing wastewater treatment plant qualify for funds under this program?
In short answer, yes. Daryl, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, and I think the short answer is yes. I think each one will be unique, and I think it will be important to explain some of the nuances and planning, maybe the need of repair. I think one of the items that this program is not for is to do maintenance that has just not been done. But we have done some projects where it does improve the reliability of water supply. So I think the short answer is yes, but yes, each one will look for independently.
Right.
Or evaluate independently.
Okay, excellent. This next question is, will a copy of this PowerPoint be sent to the attendees? And yes, we are going to, as I said, we're recording this. We'll include a copy of the PowerPoint with it. And we understand that many of you might have detailed questions, and that's why the contact information is in the PowerPoint. So you can contact Tracy or Daryl to talk about your specific project in more detail. But we will probably have the video out to everybody either tomorrow or Thursday, and the contact information is in there, and we'll also put that in the email. Okay, the next question is, does the entire project need to be completed and paid for prior to any reimbursement, or can the reimbursements be rolling in as we proceed?
My understanding of Daryl, you can jump in here, is that it can proceed on a roll-in basis.
Yes, and actually, I think we prefer that to be a rolling basis. But it does have to be related to the increment of work that is being done. But yes, when we execute a project partnership agreement, we'll discuss the method and the schedule of when to expect invoices. This is a reimbursable program mostly. So, so once invoices are made or in agency labor is gathered, just that it spells back to the project that's being done. But yes, prefer to have the maybe quarterly or even monthly type reimbursements if that's possible. We've done sometimes we've done the reimbursement once a year, but prefer it at least quarterly.
Excellent, thank you. Next question is, would a smaller funding amount be considered for a larger project? Anything can help to fund some projects. Tracy, you're muted.
Yeah, yes, that is. I think what we don't want to happen is that, you know, definitely something in the smaller range is always more preferable and it's more likely to be successful in getting funding. I think that is always a best part of it, and that's kind of why I mentioned segmented project in order to take advantage of this program. But then obviously knowing that you have other means to address other aspects of the project if you do it in that way.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, can a small private water company apply for one of these grants?
No, the systems need to be publicly owned and operated. That is the key part of this, unfortunately. So, I mean, that is the standard for this authority that exists nationwide that has not been changed in any of the instances. So it has to be publicly owned and operated.
Okay. Thank you. The next question is, how are small communities defined? I'm assuming population-based.
So at this point, the Corps of Engineers does not have a definition of how they define small and rural. I think that is something they are continuing to wrestle with, and Congress has certainly given the Corps some direction to put more fence posts around selection criteria for these projects. So I think, you know, we would encourage you to talk to us about the size of your community and in the scope of your project. I mean, ideally, a type of program is not meant for, you know, metropolitan areas, you know, over, you know, several 100,000. It just wasn't designed for that. But I think anything less than that is sort of open and fair game. And then I would say, you know, to the extent that a project is really targeted to a disadvantaged community, I mean, let's talk about that. Even if you're a large metropolitan area interested in this program, if you have a very targeted project to a disadvantaged community or segment of the community, we'll still want to talk to you and figure out if there's a way to make that work.
Okay. Next question. It was mentioned that projects start at fiscal year 2022. Is this the upcoming July 1st, 2021 or October 1st, 2021? Good
question. October 1st, 2021. So the new fiscal year will start in for 2022 on October 1st, 2021. I will caution you, Congress never gets its act together to enact appropriations bills by the start of the fiscal years, and this fiscal year was no exception. So we didn't have the final fiscal year 21 bill until December of last year. And then it usually, once Congress provides the funding for this program, the Corps develops a work plan, and that is where the funds were allocated. And so the work plan for the Corps usually follows between 30 to 60 days after Congress has appropriated the money, and that's when the funds are allocated. Even though we're talking about October this year, something to remember is don't wait to get your projects in, get them in now, so we can have those conversations now in the lead up to the fall. We want to have a robust list of projects to share with the Corps and to make sure we're taking advantage of this program fully.
Okay. Next question is, would grant funding from the Arizona Water Protection Fund qualify for the non-federal match?
Let's see. Did you read that question again? The grant funding from the
would grant funding from the Arizona Water Protection Fund qualify for the non-federal match?
Don't know the specifics of the Arizona Grant Fund, but I think yes, if there's not any federal funds in that, like Tracy mentioned, yeah, if any federal funds, the federal agency that provides those funds have to provide it in writing that it could be done. Yeah, state funds, local funds can be that 25% match or part of that 25% match.
Okay. The next question is, targeting small and rural communities on a reimbursement basis with matches seems contradictory, as funding is the primary challenge to begin with.
I understand that. I think, our challenge was, we saw an opportunity to get this program for Arizona, and what we ended up doing was amending an existing authority that exists for multiple states. And so we didn't have a lot of opportunity to do any tweaks to the program. Unfortunately, and I understand that, that is a challenge, but I hope that some communities can overcome that. I don't know, Daryl, if you have anything further about sort of timely reimbursement that can help with that.
Well, I think that might go back to that question of the rolling reimbursements, because funding is a challenge for lots of our partners on this, but I think some have done some short-term loans and then they get reimbursed or pay them back. But yeah, I think you answered it right.
Okay. Next question is, could you touch on the level of environmental reviews that are required for these projects?
Daryl, I'm going to let you handle that question.
Okay. And because it's a federal project or part of a federal project, still all of the NEPA and state requirements will be required. So that's the really short answer. I think there's no kind of a quick process, and that's one of the key things that the Corps will have to do as work that we do, is to verify, validate that environmental coordination is completed, permits are received. Does that answer the question? Hopefully.
I think so. And just a note to everybody, if you have a more detailed question, again, we'll send the contact information and you can contact Daryl or Tracy and talk to them in more detail. Really, this is just a general introduction and overview on this program. So they're there for you, and so you certainly reach out to them. The next question is, just a clarifier here in speaking about reimbursement. While the Fed's share is 75% and the local is 25%, but if a jurisdiction was counting on this money, they would need to be awarded the project first before spending the money. So the question is really one of being awarded a qualifying project before moving forward. Is this correct?
Yeah, I wish I could ask for a clarifying question. That's the project would not start until the federal project is also initiated. Is that kind of the nugget of that question, hopefully? And if that's the case, I would say yes, the Corps of Engineers, our project wouldn't start until that project partnership agreement is signed and executed. So I would suggest, yeah, not starting and implementing the project before the federal project is initiated. And Matt, if you think I missed that question, maybe follow that up and I'll try to answer that.
Yeah, and I think you answered it, but he can write it a clarifier if for some reason we didn't.
Okay.
Okay, the next question is, will it need to be publicly owned in perpetuity after the grant?
I'm going to say yes. That is a requirement that it's publicly owned and maintains that project. And then a key part of the agreement is the agreement that the sponsor or the partner maintains the project in perpetuity.
Excellent. Okay, the next question is the 75% funding loans or grants?
I mean, technically,
go ahead.
Technically, it's a grant, but unlike a typical grant you get from the federal government, I mean, it operates reimbursable basis, but it is a grant. It is not a loan.
In that last part. So you said technically it's a grant, and then I didn't hear.
But because the program operates on a reimbursable basis, it's not a direct pass-through grant. So because you have to submit a reimbursement request through the core, I mean, it's not like your typical standard federal grant where you like get the allocation of money and you can draw it down as you need it to. And here in this instance, it is a grant, but the process for accessing the funds and getting the funds is different than a typical federal grant process, if that makes sense, if I didn't confuse that situation a little more.
Nope, I think that was good. Thank you. Next question is, would a community facility district be considered as publicly owned?
A community, I'm sorry, say that again.
It's called a community facility district. And
I think that might be one that we want to coordinate with our council and determine that. I don't know if I have a direct answer, yes or no on that, but it might.
Yeah, I think we'll want to know what the nature of I'm not overly familiar with community facility districts and what their structure looks like and what that, so getting some more information on that, I think would be helpful to us in determining that, but we can follow up.
Okay, great. The next question is, when looking at disadvantaged status, do you consider colonials automatically in that category like some other funding sources?
Let's see.
I would say yes. I think the core is still working through guidance about how they'll define economically disadvantaged and economically disadvantaged minority communities, but given the role, given those designations for colonials in other programs, I would say yes, but that one's one we'll have to do a little bit more checking on.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, I understand it is a cost reimbursement program. How long does it typically take to receive the reimbursement?
In our agreements, and again, once the project is started and we have the funds, I think it's a 60-90 day payback. So it's a submission of the invoices, it's a review for 30-60 days, and then the reimbursement cut thereafter. I think that's our standard procedure that we try to hit.
Okay. Next question is, based on a federal fiscal year schedule, when should communities be starting planning with your offices, and when are applications due?
So I would just say applications are going to be taken on a rolling basis. There is no deadline, but I would encourage you to start talking to us now, especially if you're trying to determine a project. it's better to talk to us now so we can help sort of guide that process and maybe direct it in a way that's, if it has multiple parts to it, a part that might be more likely to get funded than another. So I would start to have those conversations with us now. What we don't want to do is end up being here in the fall and not having a robust list of potential projects that could be funded. But there is no deadline to submit. I think you submit as you have projects available. And again, with a specific eye toward projects that could be completed with a 1-year allocation of funding, projects that are shovel ready to go. I think the benefit of the Pasquiyaki water line project that was funded in fiscal year 21 is it had been already designed. The environmental work had been done. That was funded through another agency, and it was shovel ready. And I think that's what set that project apart from some other projects that were potentially in the queue. So it's never too early to start with our offices so we can make sure we know what communities are looking at this resource and how we can be helpful to you all in putting together the best package possible for funding.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, can rights of way, easements, land, etc. be used as the match?
Yes, they can be, as long as it's a new acquisition from private land. The lands, easements, rights of way are definitely part of, or can be definitely part of that 25% of the match. And part of that is it's the same kind of a reimbursement documentation of invoices paid for properties, of easements, of relocations, of staff time to do acquisitions and appraisals and things. So those are different products that will be required for the documentation to credit that portion of the 25% cash or cost match. But yes, it can be.
Okay, excellent. These next two questions are related. It says, it is a pass-through grant, so the local community needs to have enough cash flow to pay for the construction on a monthly basis, and that will be reimbursed through the Corps of Engineers. Is this correct assumption at this point? And then the second part is, so the local community would need 90 days or 3 months of cash flow to finance the project, waiting on reimbursements. Is that correct?
I think, yes, I think that I think that is true. And then I think the cash flow from the sponsor, that'll be something that either the board or the city councils or the council members will help decide. But I think that is smart logic and planning to have some kind of a plan for that cash flow.
Okay, we had another question just come in. Which one is true, 30 days or 90 days?
Let me, I'll look through the agreement again, and maybe we can follow up on that specific one, Matt.
Great. And I'll send these questions to you speakers also. So that's okay. The list of questions we have at this point. So I want to, again, thank our speakers, Tracy, Daryl, as well as Matt and Derek for joining us today. Again, we are going to, we're recording this. We'll send this out to all those who signed up for this session. And we'll also put information about this program in our next newsletter with contact information. So those who weren't on this session will be able to view this video and get in contact with the Congressman Stanton's office or the Army Corps of Engineers if you have questions on any of these projects, and you can get your detailed questions asked at that time. So again, thank you. Thanks to Congressman Stanton. Thank you to his staff. And thank you for the Army Corps of Engineers, excuse me, for taking the time today to answer these questions and to provide information. I'll close the session out unless the speakers have anything else they'd like to add.
I will just add thank you for joining us today. We're excited about this program. Obviously, there's nuances to using any sort of federal program and the challenges that this particular program has. We recognize. We want to hear from you. We're certainly looking for ways to improve the program. Again, we view this as another tool, a tool that Arizona had not been able to use for the last 20 years that Congress has authorized these programs. And so we are tapping into a resource we've not been able to tap into before. And it's not perfect, but it just does provide another avenue for communities to look to do environmental infrastructure and water infrastructure projects.
Great. All right. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for everybody who joined us. And if you have any other questions, you can also feel free to email me at mlore@azleague.org. And I can also put you in touch with any of the speakers. So with that, we'll close out. Thank you, everybody. Great rest of your afternoon. And thank you, our speakers again. Really appreciate it. Bye, everybody.